My treasured heart, something is shifting in your life right now. Not someday, not after you figure everything out or become someone better or suffer long enough to deserve it. Right now, in this very moment, while you are reading these words, something is moving beneath the surface of everything you can see, like roots that press through frozen ground in early spring, like water that finds its way through stone, quietly, persistently, powerfully. What I began in you is continuing, and what I began, I always complete. You may not feel it yet. You may look around at your life and see mostly the evidence of what was taken, what fell apart, what never came together the way you hoped. You may have spent a long time cataloging your losses, the relationship that crumbled, the years that passed without the things you believed would come, the version of your future that seemed so clear and then dissolved, the health that left, the person who left, the dream that left, the joy that quietly slipped out the back door when you were too exhausted to notice it going. My eyes are upon you in all of it, every detail, every silent moment, every night that stretched longer than you thought you could bear. And what my eyes see, the full picture, the complete arc, the end of the story alongside the painful middle you are currently in, is not what you see when you look at your circumstances from inside them. What I see is a life that is not finished, a story that has not reached its resolution, a field that looks bare in winter but carries underneath its surface something that winter cannot touch, something that spring will prove was never actually dead. What was taken from you is coming back, not as a vague possibility, not as something I might do if you manage to believe hard enough or pray with enough precision or somehow earn your way into my favor. What was taken from you is coming back because I am the God who makes things whole. It is in my nature never to abandon the work I start. I am the God who looks at desolate places and says, "This will bloom again." My character is to speak to dry bones and watch them fill with breath. I am the God who specializes in what looks finished, what looks beyond hope, what the world has written off as done. And I want you to understand something today about who I am and what I do. Because this is not just a word of comfort. This is a word of certainty. I do not promise things I do not fulfill. I do not speak over lives I am not committed to completing. When I say that what was lost will return, I say it from a place of full intention, full authority, and full knowledge of everything that stands between you and that return. I see every obstacle. I know the names of everything that tried to prevent you from walking in the fullness of what I planned for you. And none of it changes what I have said over your life. Pull close right now. Settle into this. Let the busyness fall away for these moments. Let the worry about what comes next step back from the center of your attention. Let me speak to the part of you that has been waiting. The part that still hopes even when hope feels foolish. The part that still believes even when belief has cost you something. The part that keeps waking up each day and putting one foot in front of the other, even when the path ahead looks nothing like the one you imagined you would be walking. That part of you is right. That stubborn, persistent, refusing to give up part of you is responding to something it recognizes, and what it recognizes is me. My voice in your spirit, telling you, hold on. Do not close your hands around the empty. Open them instead. Because what I am bringing into your life requires open hands and an open heart, and I have been preparing what I am bringing for longer than you have been waiting for it. In the 10th chapter of John, I said that I came so that you might have life, and have it to the full, not a partial life, not a life that is mostly okay in some areas while devastated in others, not a life that looks fine from the outside but carries wounds deep inside that nobody ever sees. I said life to the full, abundance, overflow, the kind of life that presses past mere survival into genuine flourishing, past maintenance into actual joy, past holding on into being completely held. That is what I had in mind for you when I formed you. That is what I had in mind when I placed you in this world at this time in this particular life. Not struggle as your permanent address, not loss as your defining narrative. not the hollow feeling of a life that never quite became what it was supposed to be. I had abundance in mind. I had fullness in mind. I had a life so richly layered with good things that you would need my help just to hold all of it, because it would be more than what any single person could carry alone. You have not arrived at that fullness yet, but you have not missed it either. What looks like the end of something is often the preparation ground for something greater. What looks like a closed door is sometimes the hallway that leads to a room you did not know existed. What looks like the death of a dream is sometimes the death of a smaller version of that dream, making space for a version so much larger and more beautiful that the original, as precious as it was to you, would not have been able to hold everything I wanted to put in it. Seeds do not look like their harvest. A seed looks dead. It looks small. It looks completely incapable of becoming what it is destined to become. You could hold a seed in your palm and study it for an hour, and never deduce from its appearance what it is actually capable of producing. There is no visible evidence, no hint of color or fragrance or nourishment or beauty in that small, hard, apparently lifeless thing. But inside that shell, there is a blueprint. There is a compressed version of something extraordinary. Given the right conditions, warmth, water, time, the hidden cooperation of the soil, that seed breaks open, and what emerges is completely unrecognizable from what went into the ground. You have been a seed in the ground. You have been in a season that felt like darkness and pressure and silence. A season with no visible evidence of what is coming. A season where you had to keep believing that the blueprint was still in you, even when nothing around you confirmed it. The darkness is not punishment. The pressure is not abandonment. The silence is not absence. All of it is the very condition that seeds require in order to become what they were created to be. The darkness is where the breaking open happens. The pressure is what forces growth upward. The silence is where the most important work gets done. Below the surface, out of sight, completely hidden from human observation, but not hidden from mine. Something is breaking open. Right now. Something is pressing upward through the soil of your circumstances and reaching for the light of what I have prepared. You may not be able to see it yet, but it is there. It is real. It is mine, and it has your name on it. Let me stay here for a moment, in this image of the seed, because it holds more than I have said so far, and I want to draw out the rest of it. When a seed breaks open underground, it does not just produce a single shoot. The breaking open releases energy that goes in two directions simultaneously. Downward, roots that press deeper into the soil, reaching for moisture and mineral, establishing the anchor and the supply line that will sustain everything above. And upward, the shoot, the visible evidence, the thing that eventually breaks through the surface and catches the light. Most people pay attention only to the upward part. They watch for the visible sign. They wait for the moment when something they can point to and say, "There, look, something is happening." And that moment is real, and it is coming, and it deserves attention. But the downward part, the root development that is happening simultaneously, below the surface, invisible to anyone watching from above, that is where the sustaining capacity is built. That is where the difference between a plant that survives one season and a plant that produces for many years is determined. In your life, both directions are happening simultaneously right now. Yes, the upward movement, the shoot of what is beginning to be visible, the small signs of change and movement that you may already be noticing if you are looking closely. But also the downward movement, the deepening of your roots, the developing of your capacity to sustain what is coming, the growth of the underground system that will make you able to hold the abundance when it arrives without it overwhelming you or slipping through your hands. Both are equally important. Both are part of what I am doing, and both are happening at the same time right now, in the unseen work that is underway in your life. The roots that are growing downward right now are going to matter when the harvest comes. They are going to be what allows you to receive what is coming and hold it well. Not with the anxious grip of someone who is afraid to lose it again, and not with the careless looseness of someone who did not work for it, but with the natural, secure, well-anchored ease of a life that is deeply rooted in the soil of what I am and what I have said. Roots make everything possible, and yours are going deeper right now than they have ever been. Not because the depth was forced on you as punishment, but because the depth was necessary for the fruit that is coming. Shallow roots cannot hold a tree through a storm. Deep roots can hold a tree through almost anything. The fruit is coming, and you are being rooted for it. So here's what I want you to do as we begin this time together. Release the grip you have maintained on your losses. Not because they did not matter, they did, deeply. Not because the pain was not real. It was, absolutely. But because holding your losses so tightly that your hands have no room for anything else is a way of living that I never designed you for. The hands that were made to receive cannot receive while they are clenched. The heart that was made to be filled cannot be filled while it is sealed shut to protect itself from the possibility of being emptied again. I designed you for receiving, for growing, for being filled and then pouring out and then being filled again, for the cycle of abundance that moves through a life that is connected to me, that understands that what comes from my hands is not limited by the scarcity logic of the world, but follows the overflow logic of a God who has no shortage. Set down the catalog of everything that went wrong. I know you have reviewed it more times than you can count. I know you know it by heart. Every entry, every date, every specific weight of each particular loss. You do not need to keep reviewing it. And I am not asking you to pretend it does not exist. I am asking you to stop letting it be the last word over your future. Because it is not the last word. I am the last word. And my word is renewal. It is return. It is abundance where there was lack. It is bloom where there was barren ground. It is joy breaking through where grief has lived for too long. It is peace settling into places that have been restless for years. It is wholeness, true, complete, from the foundation up wholeness, coming to every fractured place that you thought would never fully heal. This is what I came to give you, and giving it is exactly what I intend to do. Not because you finally deserve it, not because you have prayed perfectly or believed consistently enough, or managed to hold on to hope without any wavering. Simply because this is who I am. This is my nature. This is the direction I always move. Toward the broken, toward the empty, toward the waiting. With my hands full of what was missing, and my heart fully committed to the completion of what I started. Are you ready to hear what comes next? Because what I have to say next is the word you have been hoping for. It is the promise that did not expire while you were waiting for it. It is the future that did not get canceled when the circumstances made it look impossible. It is the life I intended for you, coming towards you with its full force. Stay with me. Let me continue. Before I tell you about what I saw through the hard years, let me say one thing that deserves to stand on its own, without being folded into the larger story. Something I have wanted to name clearly for a long time. You have been faithful, in ways that nobody around you fully sees, in ways you may not even fully recognize in yourself, because faithfulness that happens under pressure tends to feel more like stubbornness or survival than like the costly, beautiful virtue it actually is. But from where I stand, watching the complete picture of your life through this difficult season, what registers most clearly is not what went wrong. What registers is how you have kept going anyway. You kept getting up on the mornings when getting up required genuine effort. You kept showing up for the people who needed you even when you were running on empty yourself, even when what you had to give was less than what was being asked of you, and you gave it anyway. You kept your heart open, or you kept reopening it after it closed, which is actually the harder and more expensive version of faithfulness. The version that knows what openness costs and chooses it deliberately rather than just naturally. You kept believing even when believing felt foolish. When the evidence was thin and the waiting was long and the question of whether any of this was leading anywhere real became harder to answer with confidence. None of that went unnoticed. Not one morning. Not one moment of choosing to continue when stopping would have been easier. Not one decision to keep your heart available to hope when closing it against hope would have felt safer. I hold all of it. I value all of it. And I want you to hear something that is not praise for performance but recognition of who you have been. Well done. Not perfectly done. Not without struggle or doubt or the occasional collapse. but genuinely, truly, at the level that matters. Well done. You have been a person I am proud to call mine through this hard season, and that quality, that faithfulness that was forged in the difficulty, is not going to be wasted on a life that remains hard. It was built for a season of abundance. It was developed specifically so that when the good things arrive, you have the character to carry them well. The depth of appreciation, the steadiness of stewardship, the wisdom of someone who knows the value of things because they have known the weight of their absence. I built you for what is coming, and you are ready. I watched you carry the weight of that loss longer than anyone around you realized. I watched you smile in rooms full of people while something inside was quietly aching, a pain you managed skillfully enough that most people never noticed, but that was there in everything you did, coloring every interaction, adding a weight to ordinary moments that the people around you were not aware of. I watched you answer, "I am fine," when the honest answer would have been something much harder to say out loud. I watched the moments when you sat alone and let yourself feel what you had been holding back all day. The moments in the shower, the moments in the car, the moments late at night when the pretending could stop for a little while, and you could just let the actual size of what you were carrying become visible to yourself. My presence surrounded you in all of it, not with disappointment, not with the distant gaze of someone keeping score of how well you are holding up, with the eyes of a parent who watches their child carry something heavy and feels the weight of it in their own chest, who would take it from them in an instant if taking it were the right thing to do, but who understands that some weights have to be walked through rather than removed, and who stays close throughout the walking. With the presence of someone who loves you so much that your pain registers in me like a chord being struck. When you hurt, I am not unmoved. When you grieve, I grieve alongside you. Every night that was harder than you let anyone know, I was in that night with you, present, attentive, holding you in ways you could feel even when you could not name what you were feeling. When the relationship ended, and you thought for a long time that maybe you had been too much, or not enough, or somehow responsible for something that was never yours to carry, I walked beside you in that confusion. I watched you turn the ending over in your hands for months, examining it from every angle, trying to find the explanation that would make it make sense. I watched you carry the particular grief of a loss that comes with questions that never fully resolve. I watched you work through the grief in layers. The first layer of raw shock when the reality was still new, and you were still adjusting to a world that no longer contained what you expected it to contain. The second layer of anger, at the situation, at the person, at yourself, at me. The third layer of bargaining with what was already done, replaying the moments where different choices might have led somewhere different. The fourth layer of the deep sadness underneath all the other feelings, the pure grief of missing something that had been real and was now gone. And finally, the layer where you began to learn to live with the empty space that was left, where you started reconstructing a daily life around the absence and figuring out who you were in the new arrangement. I walked through every single one of those layers with you, not watching from a distance, accompanying, present in the specific texture of each stage. When your finances did not do what you needed them to do, when you checked numbers and ran calculations and tried to figure out how to make what you had stretch further than it was designed to stretch, when the stress of it crept into your sleep and altered how you woke up and shaped the background hum of ordinary days, I was present in all of that. I knew the weight of it. I knew what it did to your sense of security and stability. I knew how it chipped away at your ability to be fully present in moments of joy, because there was always this background worry standing at the edge of the room, reminding you that things were not as stable as they needed to be, reminding you that there was a problem you had not yet solved. I knew the particular humiliation that sometimes accompanies financial difficulty, the ways it makes a person feel like they have failed at something fundamental, like they are somehow less than they should be, like everyone else has figured out something they have not. I heard that voice in your head, and I want you to know it was never my voice. It was never my assessment of you. You kept going anyway. You showed up for the people who depended on you. You continued to work with what you had even when what you had felt hopelessly insufficient. You made hard choices without complaint. You gave from a place of genuine emptiness more times than anyone knew, and the giving did not feel graceful or beautiful in those moments. It felt like scraping the bottom of a barrel that was already scraped. But it was real giving. It was real faithfulness. And I recorded every single act of it. When your health gave you trouble, I was attentive to every detail. I knew the appointments, the dates on the calendar, the anxiety of the days leading up to them, the particular feeling of sitting in a waiting room with a magazine you are not reading while your mind runs through possibilities you do not want to think about. I knew the results and what they meant and what you were told and what you were not told and what you carried out of those rooms that nobody explained to you because explanation was not part of that day's agenda. I knew the fears, the specific ones, the ones that visited you at 3 a.m, and the ones that showed up in the middle of otherwise ordinary activities and pulled you out of the present and into a place of frightened speculation. I knew what it was like to feel your own body becoming uncertain territory, to lose the easy, unreflective confidence of someone who inhabits their body without noticing it, and to become someone who is now constantly aware of the body, monitoring it, listening to it, searching it for evidence of how things are going. My hands were on you in those moments. My presence filled those rooms. Not as a guarantee that every result would be the best result, not as a promise that the medicine would always work or the treatment would always succeed, but as the reality of accompaniment. You were not in those rooms alone. I was with you in the fear. I was with you in the receiving of hard news. I was with you in the days of adjustment after the news, when you were figuring out what your life looked like now inside this new reality, and I was already working toward what comes after. When the family went through what it went through, the tension, the silence, the misunderstandings that grew into distances, the words said that could not be unsaid, the conversations that should have happened and never did, the dynamics that shifted in ways that left gaps where closeness used to be. I witnessed every conversation and every silence. I saw the love that was still there underneath the difficulty. Love does not disappear when relationships become hard. It goes underground, like a river, invisible from the surface but still moving. I saw the love under the hurt in every person involved. I saw the good intentions that got buried under fear and pride and the accumulated weight of unresolved grievances. I saw the parts of each person that were doing the best they knew how, even when their best was falling short of what the situation needed. I never stopped loving every one of them. Not for a single day of the difficult season. Not in the moments when they were at their worst. Not in the moments when the distance between them felt most permanent. Not in the moments when you wondered if anything would ever be the same again. I held all of them in my sight and in my care simultaneously, and I held you in the midst of your grief over what the family had become. When the dream began to feel like it might not happen, the thing you had believed for, worked toward, prayed about, imagined in specific and loving detail, prepared yourself to receive, when that thing started to seem further away instead of closer, when evidence of progress was replaced by evidence of delay, when the expectation that had once felt so natural began to feel like the luxury of someone who could afford to believe things that the circumstances did not support, I watched what that did to you. I watched you try to reframe it. Watched you try to make peace with the idea that maybe it was not meant to be. Watched you try to grieve it quietly without letting it show too much, because grief over something that never arrived feels less legitimate somehow than grief over something that arrived and then left. Watched you try to build alternate plans around the empty space where that dream had been. And through all of that, underneath the resignation, underneath the alternate plans, underneath the quiet effort to make peace with a life that looked different from the one you had imagined, I watched you hold a small, stubborn ember of hope, barely visible, easy to miss if you were not paying close attention, but there, still there. The hope that refused, even at its most diminished, to go entirely out. That ember was mine. I placed it there. I maintained it through every season when you had no idea it was still burning. And I want you to know something important about what that ember means. It does not exist in a person who has been abandoned. That kind of stubborn, refusing to die hope in the face of everything that argues against it is something I put inside people I am not finished with, people I am actively protecting, people whose story is still going somewhere that the present circumstances cannot reveal. I am not finished with you, not even close to finished. Let me stay with you a little longer in this place of being seen, because I have more to say about what I watched and what it means. I watched you in the moments when you almost gave up, not the dramatic moments. Those are easier to identify and harder to forget. I watched the quiet ones. The afternoon when you sat down and genuinely considered whether it was worth continuing to hope for a particular thing, and the decision to keep hoping felt so thin and so costly that you were not entirely sure you made the right choice in making it. The morning when you could not find a reason to be glad that the day had come and you had to sit with that feeling for a while before you could find your footing again. The conversation where someone said something with good intentions that landed exactly wrong and left you wondering, just for a moment, if maybe the version of your life that existed only inside you was just a private fantasy that had no correspondence to anything real. I watched you through all of those moments, and I want you to know that in every one of them, the choice you made, to continue, to hold on, to keep the hope alive even at its most reduced and fragile, was not made alone. My presence was with you in that choice. My spirit was the quiet strength underneath the conscious act of deciding not to give up. The resources you drew from in those moments were not only yours, they were mine, available to you, offered to you in exactly the moment you needed them, even though you did not necessarily identify them as such at the time. You also need to know something about the prayers you stopped praying, the ones that started to feel too costly, not because you stopped believing in prayer, but because asking repeatedly for the same thing without visible movement was becoming a particular kind of pain. And eventually, the mercy to yourself was to stop reopening the wound that way. I want you to know that I heard every one of those prayers, including the ones you stopped praying out loud but continued, without quite realizing it, to carry in the deepest part of your desire. The prayers of the heart that are too fundamental to be entirely silenced, the hopes that are so rooted in who you are that they persist even when you have officially stopped asking. I hear those too. I have always heard those. Nothing you have ever prayed has been ignored or lost or assessed as insufficient and set aside. Every prayer, spoken and unspoken, articulate and barely formed, confident and desperate, all of it has been received by me. All of it has been part of the ongoing conversation between your life and mine. And the fullness of what I am sending back is proportioned to the fullness of everything that was brought to me, including the things brought in tears, including the things brought in anger, including the things brought in the wordless need of someone who had stopped knowing how to articulate what they needed, but knew they needed something. Consider what it means to be known at that level. Not the level of polished presentation, not the version of yourself you bring to settings where you want to make a good impression, not even the version you let the people who love you most see. The deepest level, the raw, unfinished, sometimes confused, sometimes frightened, sometimes angry, sometimes barely coherent level. The level where you are simply and completely yourself, with no performance and no editing. I live at that level. That is where I am most at home with you, not in the polished moments, but in the real ones. And my love for you at that level is exactly the same as my love for you at any other level. Complete, unchanging, not improved when you are at your best, and not diminished when you are at your worst. You have been fully known and fully loved through all of it. Every version of yourself that showed up in the hard years. Every imperfect, struggling, sometimes failing, always trying version, loved, known, held. And here is something I watched that you may not have noticed yourself. Something that happened in you during the hard years that is worth naming, because you are going to need to know it when you walk into what comes next. I watched you grow. Not in the easy ways that growth happens in comfortable seasons. Not the growth of someone who is expanding in the direction of what they already are, adding more of what was already working. I watched the harder, deeper, more permanent kind of growth that only happens when a person is under pressure. The kind that changes the actual structure of who you are, rather than just adding new features to the existing version. I watched your capacity for compassion deepen in ways that would not have been possible without what you went through. There is a kind of empathy that is intellectual. You understand that other people suffer, and you can imagine what that must be like for them. And then there is the kind that comes from having genuinely suffered yourself, that lives in the body and not just the mind, that recognizes pain in other people not as a concept, but as a shared territory. You have that second kind now. The person who sat with you in your hardest moments, who you could not see but who you sometimes felt, that is who you are now becoming for others. The depth of genuine presence with other people in pain that you bring now is something you could not have brought before. I watched your faith move from one thing to another. Before the testing, your faith was real, but it was untried. It had not yet been asked to maintain itself without the support of favorable circumstances. It had not yet been required to hold on in the dark. Faith like that is genuine but fragile. It tends to be confident when things are going well, and to struggle when things are not. After the testing, faith becomes something different. Quieter, often. Less publicly demonstrative. Less likely to be certain about the details. But at the core, absolutely unshakable. Because the core has been tested. The core went through the fire and came out the other side. The core knows, from experience and not just from principle, that I am real, that I am present, and that I do not abandon what I have started. What you have in that core now is worth more than what you had before, and it is going to be the most important thing you carry into the season ahead. Everything you went through was working at a level below what you could see. All of it was forming something in you. All of it was clearing space, developing capacity, building depth that would be needed for what was coming. And all of it was held by my hands the entire time, not passively, not at a distance, not as an observer watching you struggle through something I was not involved in. Actively held, intentionally accompanied, purposefully shaped. You were never alone in any of it, not for a single moment. Even the moments that felt most like absence were not absence. My presence was the thing that made the survivable seasons survivable, and the impossible seasons possible. Even when you could not feel me, I was the ground beneath your feet. The warmth you felt even in the cold. The strange, inexplicable sense that somehow, it was going to be all right. That was me. Speaking beneath language, below the level of argument and evidence, directly into the part of you that is made of my breath and knows my voice. And now I want to speak above that level too, clearly, directly, in words you can hold and return to. Every single loss you experienced, I saw it, I recorded it. I have not forgotten a single entry in that accounting. Not the years, and not the relationships that fell apart during those years. Not the health or the finances that were consumed. Not the dreams, nor the family connections that frayed. Neither the joy that went missing nor the peace that became fragile, nor the sense of yourself that you were before the difficult seasons began. Every item is in my hands, and this is what I do with things that are in my hands. I make them whole. I take what was consumed and I make the fields produce again, more abundantly than before. I take what the years held back, and I return it in fullness, with interest, with the abundance that accounts not just for the loss, but for the time of loss. I make something out of the combination of what was taken and what grew in the taking that could never have existed without the whole story. What I am doing in your life is not reversal. It is something better than reversal. Let me explain why that distinction matters. But first, let me speak specifically about something I watched change in you that is deeply important for what comes next. Something that is not as easy to see as the growth of compassion or the deepening of faith, but that is just as real and just as significant. I watched the way you hold yourself change over the course of the hard years. Not your posture, though that changed too, and I noticed, but the internal way you hold your own personhood. In the beginning, before the long difficulty, there was a quality of ease in how you existed in your own skin. A kind of native confidence, not arrogance, not the loud confidence of someone who needs to impress, but the quiet, functional confidence of someone who knows, at least somewhat, who they are, and that who they are is basically acceptable. People watching is its own form of perception, and what I watched in you before the long season of difficulty was a person who had a general, largely unexamined sense of their own okayness. Then the hard things happened. And what the hard things did, over time, to that quiet, functional confidence was significant. Difficulty has a way of raising questions about a person's own adequacy. When things go wrong, when relationships fail, when dreams do not arrive, when circumstances do not improve despite effort and prayer and all the right things being done, one of the natural human responses is to look inward and ask, is it me? Is there something about me that is producing these results? Is the problem not the circumstances, but the person inside the circumstances? You have asked that question more than once, in more than one area of your life. And sometimes the questioning went to places that were not just honest self-examination, but something darker. A voice that used the evidence of difficulty to build a case against you, against your worth, against your deserving, against the possibility that things could be different because you are the common factor in the situations that have not gone well. I want to address that voice directly, because it is not my voice, and I want the distinction to be completely clear. My voice, when it speaks about where you have fallen short, speaks with the intent of helping you see clearly so that you can change, grow, choose differently. It does not linger. It does not rehearse. It does not build cases. It names. It offers a better way, and it moves on. In the direction of grace, always. My corrections are surgical and kind. They are in the service of your flourishing, not the diminishment of your sense of self. The voice that has been building the case against you, using your losses as evidence of your inadequacy, using the things that have not worked as proof that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. That voice is not mine, and I want you to stop letting it speak as though it were. You are not the reason the hard things happened. Some of those hard things happened because the world is broken, and broken things affect even people who are doing everything right. Some of them happened because other people made choices that had consequences that reached into your life without your permission. Some of them were the result of living in a time and place where certain kinds of difficulty are simply part of the territory. And yes, some of them involved your own choices and limitations. But your choices and limitations do not define your worth, and your limitations do not disqualify you from the goodness I have planned. You are worthy of what I have planned for you, not because you are perfect, not because you have navigated everything correctly, but because I decided you were worthy before you had done anything at all, before you had succeeded or failed at anything, before the question of your adequacy was even on the table. I decided your worth. I am the one who makes that determination, and my determination has not changed. What I watched change in you, the erosion of the quiet self-assurance, the infiltration of the questioning voice, the internal shift toward a more defended and less easeful way of inhabiting your own life. That is one of the things I am specifically in the process of addressing. I am returning to you a clearer and more stable sense of who you are and what you are worth. Not pride, not the defensive confidence of someone who has to protect their sense of self because it is fragile. Steady, grounded, received confidence of someone who knows they are known completely, and still chosen. You are loved. You are seen. You are chosen, not as a consolation prize, not as what I am settling for in the absence of something better, as a genuine, specific, personal love, the kind that selected you out of all the possibilities and said, this one, this particular person, in this particular life, with this particular history, I want this one. Let that truth settle somewhere deeper than the place where arguments about worth usually happen. Let it settle below the level where the difficult questions about yourself get asked, below the level where the evidence gets weighed. Let it sit at the level of foundation, below everything else, as the solid ground on which all the other recovering can stand. You are worth what is coming, every bit of it, not because you have earned it, because I say so. And I am the one whose word on that subject is final. Consider this carefully, because it is one of the most important things I want you to understand about how I work, and it will change how you receive what is coming. Reversal would mean going back, reversing time, returning to the exact moment before the loss and undoing it, giving you back your life exactly as it was. The relationship intact, the health uncompromised, the finances stable, the dreams still vivid and approaching. Everything as it was before any of the hard things happened. Here is what makes that insufficient, even if it were possible. It would return you to the version of yourself that existed before all of this. That person, beloved and precious as they were, did not have what you have now, did not have the depth, did not have the compassion, did not have the unshakable center, did not have the knowledge of their own resilience, or the clarity about what actually matters, or the capacity for gratitude that only comes from having needed grace and received it. Going back would cost you everything you gained through what you endured. And what you gained is real and irreplaceable. It is genuinely yours in a way that easy things are not. What makes my way better than reversal is this: I do not erase the story, I redeem it. I take the full arc, the good beginning, the hard middle, the losses and the survivals and the growth that happened inside the suffering, and I bring it to a completion that incorporates everything. The joy that comes on the other side of this carries within it the full knowledge of what it was like to be without it. The peace that settles into you carries the memory of what restlessness felt like. The abundance that arrives knows the exact shape of the lack it is filling. What I give you is not the same thing given to someone who never lost it. What I give you is richer, more nuanced, more appreciated, more deeply yours because of everything it traveled through to reach you. Think about what it means for something to be redeemed. In the ancient understanding, redemption meant paying the price to buy back what was lost, purchasing freedom for what was enslaved, reclaiming what had been surrendered and bringing it back into its rightful ownership. But the redeemed thing was not diminished by its time in bondage. It was not less than what it had been before. It came back with its story intact, with the freedom purchased for it recognized in every moment of its freed existence, with a weight of meaning that things that were never lost could never carry. Your life is being redeemed, and in the redemption, what returns is not just what was taken. What returns is what was taken, plus the person you became while it was gone, plus what I add as only I can add. The abundance that was always part of the intention, but could only be received by the person you have become through all of this. Here is what many people do not realize about the nature of this kind of making whole. It does not work in isolated areas. I do not patch one corner of a life and leave the rest in disrepair. When I say whole, I mean whole, the full scope, the complete picture, every dimension that has been affected. I do not renew your finances while leaving your joy broken. I do not give back the dream while leaving your relationships fractured. I do not return your health while leaving your peace in ruins. I work comprehensively, reaching into every part of your life with the same intention and the same authority. This matters because many people, when they pray for things to be made right, have one specific thing in mind. The one loss that hurts most. The one area they most desperately want to see changed. They bring that one thing to me, and they wait for movement in that one specific place. And I am moving there. I am absolutely addressing the thing you most desperately need to see addressed. But I am also moving in the places you forgot to bring to me. The areas where the loss became normalized so gradually that you stopped recognizing it as loss. The areas where disappointment was repeated often enough that you stopped expecting anything different. The areas you have stopped praying about because praying about them started to feel like choosing to hurt yourself with hope. I am moving there too. Not because you brought those areas to me with the right prayer, but because I hold the complete picture of your life. Every corner of it. Every closed room. Every window that has been dark for so long that you have begun to assume darkness is simply what that window does. Things are changing in those places. My light is reaching those windows. My attention is in those closed rooms. The comprehensiveness of what I am doing is going to surprise you when you begin to see it. Not just the one thing you were hoping for, but all the things. The full inventory of what was missing, beginning to return. There is also something important to understand about timing. Not just that my timing is not your timing, which is true, but can sound dismissive when you are in the middle of a long wait. What I mean is something more specific. The timing of when good things arrive in a life affects the quality of how they are received and what they become once they are present. The same gift given at different moments in a person's development produces completely different results. Something given too early, before the capacity to receive it is formed, can overwhelm, can be wasted, can be held without the depth needed to fully inhabit it. What is coming to you needed to come now, not earlier, now. Because now you are the person who can fully receive it. Now you have the depth to inhabit it. Now you have the gratitude to honor it. Now you have the wisdom to steward it well. Now the things that might have been hazardous for an earlier version of you, the influence, the abundance, the fulfillment, are going to be exactly what they were designed to be, because you are exactly who you were designed to be when you receive them. The wait was not cruelty. The wait was preparation. And what you waited for is arriving into the prepared version of you. Let me take a moment to speak about what happens in a life during a long wait, because I want to give you a different frame for the years you feel were spent in delay rather than in progress. When a builder constructs something that is meant to last, not a temporary structure, not something meant for a single season, but something built to endure decades and carry real weight, the preparation of the foundation takes longer than any other phase of the project. From the outside, watching the construction site, the first weeks look like very little is happening. The ground is being excavated, concrete is being poured and then left to cure. Tests are being run to make sure the material is solid. Everything visible is still raw and unfinished and gives no indication of the building that is coming. Someone who did not understand construction might look at that site and think, nothing is happening here. This is taking too long. Why is there no progress? But a builder knows that this phase is where everything that determines the future of the structure is established. Every crack in a foundation becomes a problem in every floor above it. Every weakness in the base becomes a liability in everything built on top of it. The patience of this phase is not delay, it is investment. It is the recognition that what you are building is worth getting right, worth the time the preparation requires, worth the period of invisible work before the visible work can begin. I have been building something in your life, and I have been building it in a way that makes it worth building, with attention to the foundation, with care for the parts that are invisible, with the kind of thorough preparation that slow-looking phases require. The years that felt like nothing was happening were the foundation years, the years when the excavation was being done, the ground being prepared, the structure of what was coming being established in dimensions you could not see. And now, the visible work is beginning. Now what was being built underground is ready to emerge. Now the preparation period is giving way to the construction period, and the construction period will move with a different energy and a different visibility than what came before. You are going to see movement. You are going to be able to point to it, name it, share it with the people in your life. The evidence is coming. The visible fruit of the invisible work is on its way. And when it comes, you will look back at the preparation period not as wasted time, but as exactly the time that was needed to make what is coming possible. What I am about to say comes from one of the most direct promises I have ever spoken about this specific kind of situation, the situation of years that were consumed, that felt stolen, that passed in difficulty rather than abundance. I said it through the prophet Joel to a people who had lived through devastation. I said, I will make up to you for the years that the locust has eaten. Consider the weight of that word for a moment. Not, I will give you a new start with the slate wiped clean, which would itself be extraordinary. Not, I will bring good things in the future that will help you move past the hard things in the past. Something more specific, more direct, more personal than either of those. I will make up for the years themselves, the lost years, the consumed years, the years that were not what they should have been. The people hearing that word had watched locusts strip their fields bare, not once but in waves, each wave taking what the previous one had left. Years of agricultural work, years of accumulated cultivation, years of planning and planting and tending, all of it consumed. And I said, I will compensate for it. I will give you back what was lost, and I will add the interest of the years. That is the shape of what I am speaking over your life right now. Not, I will do something nice for you going forward, separate from and unrelated to the hard years. But, I will compensate for the hard years themselves. What the difficulty ate from you. What the long seasons of lack consumed from the storehouses of your life. I will make up for it. I will give you back its equivalent in abundance and quality and richness of living, and I will do it with the generosity of a God for whom nothing is scarce and no debt to those I love goes unaddressed. Here is what that compensation looks like. It does not look like a literal reversal of time, as we discussed. It looks like the quality of the seasons ahead being so rich, so full, so marked by the flourishing that was absent during the hard years, that the living you do in those abundant seasons carries within it the weight of what was missed. Not in a mournful way. In the way that a person who finally sits down to a feast after genuine hunger has a relationship with that food that someone who was never hungry simply cannot have. Every bite means something different. The abundance is inhabited with a fullness of appreciation that requires the contrast to generate. You are going to live abundantly with the full knowledge of what it means to have abundance. And that knowing is going to make the abundance itself a richer thing than it would have been without the contrast. Think about the field in that ancient text. The locusts came in waves. First the young locusts, then the adult locusts, then the great swarm. Each wave took what the previous one had left. And after all of that, the fields were bare. Not just of this year's harvest, but of the trees and vines and deep-rooted things that took years to grow. The loss was not just current, it was cumulative. And to that cumulative, layered, years-deep loss, I said, I will make up for it. I will compensate for every wave. I will account for every year. Your losses have been like that. Not a single event, but a sequence. Not one hard season, but several, sometimes overlapping, sometimes compounding each other. And I want you to know that my compensation is calibrated to the full accumulation, not to the most recent loss or the most visible one, but to the complete accounting. Every wave that came through, every year of the sequence, I hold the full total, and the fullness of what I bring back is proportioned to the fullness of what was taken. This is the God you are dealing with. Not a God who takes note of the obvious and misses the rest. A God who counts carefully, who keeps complete accounts, who does not overlook a single season of what you endured, and who addresses the full total with abundance that matches and exceeds it. Let that settle into you. Now let me speak about something that I have been watching, something that is connected to the idea of the harvest and the seasons, something that has been happening in the earth of your life during the years when it looked like nothing was growing. A vine takes years to produce its best fruit, not weeks, not months, years. The first year, a newly planted vine barely survives. It puts almost all of its energy into establishing its root system, growing deep into the earth, finding the water table, establishing the connections underground that will eventually sustain everything that grows above. There is almost nothing visible to show for it. The surface looks sparse and unimpressive. But below the surface, a network of roots is being established that will one day make the vine capable of producing more than you can imagine. The second year is a little better. There is more visible growth, but the pruning is still heavy. The grower cuts back almost everything the vine puts out, and this seems wrong to an observer. It seems counterproductive to cut away growth. But the grower knows what the observer does not, that pruning forces the energy of the vine downward and inward, into the development of capacity rather than the premature production of fruit. The fruit that is produced in the early years of a vine is not the full expression of what that vine can produce. It is practice fruit, early fruit, the partial expression of potential that is not yet fully developed. It is not until the vine has been established for many years, put through pruning seasons and dry seasons and the tests of varying weather, that it begins to produce fruit at the quality and quantity it was created for. And then, what it produces is extraordinary. Not just more than it produced in the early years, but fundamentally better. The complexity, the richness, the depth of what a mature vine produces cannot be replicated by any shortcut. It requires time. It requires the exact sequence of seasons, including the pruning seasons that felt like regression, including the dry seasons that seemed to threaten survival, including all of it. You are the vine. The years of establishment were not wasted. The pruning seasons, the times when things that you had invested in were cut away, when growth you had worked for did not remain, when you had to begin again in areas where you thought you had already made progress. Those seasons did not subtract from your potential. They redirected your energy. They sent what you had deeper, building capacity that was not yet visible, establishing roots that will sustain the fruit that is coming. And the fruit that is coming from your life, having gone through all of this, having been through the pruning and the drought and the testing, is going to be of a quality that could not have been produced any other way. It is going to carry within it the fullness that only comes from maturity, from being tested, from having been through things and come through them. The grower who has tended you through all of this, who has made decisions about your growth that sometimes looked like damage, who has allowed dry seasons because dry seasons force deeper roots, who has pruned things that looked like good growth because the energy was needed elsewhere. That grower sees the full vine, not just what it is now, but what it is becoming. And from that vantage point, everything that has happened in your growing makes sense. Everything that seemed like setback was part of the cultivation. And what is coming, the full fruit of a mature and well-established vine, the harvest of years of patient cultivation, is going to be extraordinary. This is the promise. This is what is ahead. Not just a little fruit, not just some recovery, not just a return to a prior level of growth. The full, abundant, overflowing harvest of a vine that has been cultivated by the best grower there is. Get ready. The harvest is not as far away as the hard years have made it seem. Let me also speak about this. The specific kind of abundance I am bringing, and what it looks like in the daily texture of an ordinary life. Because abundance can sound like a grand concept, large, vague, spiritual in a way that floats above the practical reality of actual days. I want to bring it down into the specific and the ordinary, because that is where you actually live, and that is where the abundance is actually going to show up. Abundance looks like waking up and knowing that today is enough, that what you have, and what I provide, and what arrives through the day is sufficient for the day. Not anxious mathematics before you have even gotten out of bed. Not the inventory of what is missing before you have started. Not the familiar background hum of not enough that has been running underneath too many days. Quiet, sufficient, the sense of being in a life that is providing what it needs to provide. In your relationships, this means a quality of genuine ease, not without the occasional difficulty. All relationships have those, but the fundamental tone of ease. The sense that the people in your life are with you, that they want to be, that the connection is not a constant negotiation between parties who are fundamentally uncertain about each other. The warmth of being among people who know you and choose you and are glad to. The work you do will carry a different quality. Work that you are genuinely suited for, that uses what you are actually made of, that produces something you can be glad about. Work that is an expression of your particular design, rather than a mismatch. Work where the effort feels more like engagement than like depletion. Where you come home tired sometimes, but tired in the good way of someone who did something that mattered. Inside you, something creative will come alive again. The part of you that responds to beauty, that makes things, that notices and appreciates, and brings your own particular way of seeing to the world. The part that may have gone quiet during the hard season, because survival and creation rarely coexist easily. That part waking up and finding its voice again, finding things to respond to, finding the energy and the spaciousness for things that are not strictly necessary but that make a life feel like a life rather than just a series of tasks. And generosity will feel different when this fullness arrives. Being able to give without calculation. Being able to say yes to someone who needs something without first running the complex mental math of whether you can afford the yes. The freedom of open hands, of resources that are genuinely in the flow rather than carefully hoarded because there might not be more where they came from. This is what is coming into your life, not a single dramatic change that fixes everything in one moment. But the cumulative arrival of all of these things, some at once and some in sequence, building on each other, filling the spaces that have been empty, producing the quality of living that the word abundance actually points toward when it is understood in its full meaning. Let me also speak for just a moment about the people who are going to be part of what I bring into your life. Because very often, the way I provide what someone needs is through another person, through a connection that gets made, through a relationship that opens a door, through a friendship that becomes significant in ways neither person anticipated at the beginning. There are people in your story whose chapters have not yet been written, people you have not met yet who are going to become important to you, people you know already who are going to become something more or something different from what they currently are to you. I am a God who works through people, who uses human connection as one of my primary methods of provision and of love. And the network of relationships in your life is not fixed. It is going to grow. It is going to shift in quality. Some relationships that have been peripheral are going to become central. Some that have been sources of depletion are going to naturally move to the edges. New ones are going to arrive with a kind of rightness and ease that marks them as something I arranged. Pay attention to the people who show up in your life in the coming season. Some of them are going to arrive carrying exactly the thing you need, not because they know what you need, but because I arrange the timing. Pay attention to the conversations that feel unexpectedly significant. Pay attention to the moments of recognition, when you meet someone and feel, without being able to fully explain it, that this person matters. Those moments are not random, they are mine. Your story is being populated with people who belong in it. The relationships that were lost are not the full inventory of the relationships that are yours. There is more connection, more genuine closeness, more people who will know you and be glad they do, more of the particular joy of being truly understood by someone who is genuinely present with you. This is coming. Let it. Your joy is making its way back to you. And I want to describe to you the specific kind of joy I am talking about, because it is important that you understand what to expect. Not because receiving it requires a particular level of readiness, but because you deserve to know what is coming so that when it arrives, you recognize it for what it is. This is not the thin, surface kind of happiness that depends entirely on favorable circumstances. That kind of feeling is real, but it is fragile. It arrives when things go well and it departs when things go badly, and it has no root of its own that sustains it through difficult weather. I'm not talking about that. What is returning to you is something deeper and more durable. It is the kind of joy that the early writers of my letters described when they talked about being joyful in all circumstances. Not joyful because all circumstances are pleasant, but joyful in the midst of all circumstances because of something that exists underneath the circumstances and is not determined by them. This is joy that has roots. Joy that is anchored in the knowledge of who I am and what I have committed to. Joy that has survived testing and come out the other side and knows, from experience, that it can survive testing again. Consider what joy like that looks like in a life. It is not giddiness. It is not the surface brightness of someone who has never had anything go wrong, or who is performing contentment for the benefit of observers. It is something you might describe as quiet, though calling it quiet understates its fullness, because it is quiet in the way that deep water is quiet. Not empty, profoundly full, but not noisy about it. It is the gladness of someone who knows they are held. The settled warmth of someone who knows that the hardest things they have been through were not the end of their story. The gentle, persistent brightness of someone who has evidence, real, lived, experienced evidence, that I do not abandon what I have started. That warmth, that groundedness, that light that does not go out when the weather changes. That is the joy returning to you. You will feel it before you fully understand it. That is how deep things arrive. They show up in your body and your spirit before your mind has caught up to what is happening. You will find yourself lighter on a day when nothing particular has changed in your circumstances. You will notice that something that was heavy for a long time has become somehow less heavy. You will discover yourself genuinely laughing in a moment and realize afterward that the laugh was real, not performed, not manufactured, but genuinely yours. You will find yourself able to be present in a good moment without the familiar undercurrent of dread, able to receive something beautiful without immediately calculating how long it will last before it goes away. That is joy, my joy, taking up residence in you again, not as a visitor this time, as something that belongs there. Peace is returning too. Let me tell you about the specific peace I am bringing, because peace can mean different things, and I want you to know what you are receiving. In my letter to the church at Philippi, I described a peace that passes understanding, not a peace that makes sense of everything. That would be a different thing, and not what I was offering. A peace that exists beyond the reach of understanding. A peace that you find yourself in possession of even when nothing in your circumstances has changed, even when the problem is still there, even when the question is still unanswered, even when the thing that has been causing anxiety is still present and still real. How does that work? It works because this peace is not generated by favorable conditions. It is not produced by resolved circumstances. It is given directly from me to you. It is not something you manufacture through enough positive thinking or careful management of your exposure to stressful information. It is something you receive. It settles in. It takes up residence in the place where anxiety has been living, and it establishes itself there with a quiet authority that anxiety cannot challenge. This is the peace that is coming into you. It is already in motion. In the spaces between your worried thoughts, in the moments when the anxiety releases its grip for a few minutes, and you feel something underneath it that is solid and quiet. That is the early arrival of what is coming in fullness. That is the peace beginning to establish itself. The moments of unexpected quiet in the middle of a situation that should produce only anxiety. Those are not random. Those are previews. Let it come. Do not be suspicious of it. Do not decide that feeling peaceful while things are still uncertain means you are not taking the situation seriously enough or not doing enough about what needs to be done. Peace is not the absence of wisdom or diligence. It is a quality that can coexist with both. It is the condition that allows wisdom and diligence to function at their best, unburdened by the exhausting weight of constant vigilance and dread. And hope, that tired, quiet, carefully guarded hope that you have been protecting, is coming back to life. Not the naive hope of someone who has never had their hopes disappointed. Not the confident hope of someone who simply has not been tested yet. Something better than both of those. The mature hope of someone who has had their hopes disappointed, who knows what that feels like, who has counted the cost of hoping and chosen to continue anyway. This is the most powerful kind of hope that exists, because it is not dependent on evidence or on a good track record of outcomes. It is grounded in something that has proven itself faithful, even through the disappointments. Your hope is not naive. It is not uninformed by what you have been through. It is informed by every hard thing you have experienced, and it has survived all of them, and it is still here. And I am giving it back its full vitality, the forward-leaning, expectant, genuinely anticipating quality that hope is supposed to have when it is alive and well. Let me speak about hope a little more, because I think it deserves more than a passing mention. Hope is not a secondary or supplementary thing in a human life. It is foundational. A person can endure almost anything when they have genuine hope. Not manufactured optimism, not positive self-talk that is working against the weight of the evidence, but the real thing, grounded in the real faithfulness of a real God who has a real intention for their future. A person without hope is not simply less happy. They are less capable of everything. Hope is the fuel of action, the sustainer of endurance, the quality that makes getting up the next day a project worth undertaking. When hope goes thin, everything else gets harder. Not just the emotional experience of life, though that is real, but the practical functioning of it. Decisions are harder to make when hope is thin, because every decision requires some belief that the outcome matters, that the future is worth investing in. Relationships are harder to maintain when hope is thin, because connection requires a degree of willingness to be present and available that is difficult to sustain when the underlying orientation toward life is one of emptiness, rather than expectation. Work is harder when hope is thin, because effort requires the belief that effort produces something. I know what thin hope does. I have watched it in you. I have seen how the thinning of hope has affected not just your emotional life, but the full texture of your daily experience. And this is precisely why renewing your hope is one of the first and most foundational things I am doing. Before the circumstances change, before the visible evidence arrives, before the specific losses are addressed, the hope is being restored. Because you need hope to receive what is coming. You need the forward-leaning orientation of genuine expectation to be in the posture that allows what I am sending to land fully, rather than being met with a guarded and disbelieving half-reception. Hope is arriving. Let it. Open the door wide when it knocks, and do not make it prove itself beyond what it is capable of proving in this moment. Simply let it in. Let the warmth of it spread through the places that have been cold. Let the forward-leaning quality of it change the way you face the days ahead. Let it do what hope was designed to do, give you back the future as a place worth walking toward. What was taken from your family is returning. I am working in the hearts of the people who belong to your story, not in ways that override their freedom, but in ways that create openings, moments of unusual softness, prompts toward conversations that need to happen, a loosening of the pride that made it easier to stay distant than to move toward reconnection. A quiet but persistent awareness that the relationship matters, that the gap costs something, that the closing of the distance is worth whatever vulnerability it requires. Some of these changes you will notice in others. Someone who was closed will seem unexpectedly open. Someone who was guarded will say something that surprises you with its honesty. Someone who maintained distance will make a small move in your direction that you did not see coming. These moments are not coincidences. They are the fruit of work I have been doing in places you cannot see, in hearts you cannot directly access, in the deep places where people make the choices about whether to remain defended or to risk the exposure of genuine connection. Let those moments count when they come. Do not dismiss them as too small. Do not require that the first sign of openness be the full, complete healing before you respond to it with warmth. Small openings, responded to with gentleness and without pressure, become larger openings. The path back to genuine closeness almost always starts with something that feels almost too small to matter. Honor the small things. They are the seeds of what grows. Relationships that are truly mended in the way that I do it, not just repaired on the surface but genuinely healed from the inside, often become the most precious relationships in a person's life. Because they carry the story of what they survived. They carry the choice that was made to return when returning was difficult. They carry the evidence that the bond was strong enough to endure the testing, and that evidence makes the bond itself feel safer and more trustworthy going forward. What you thought was permanently damaged may become something you describe to others as your most important relationship, precisely because of what it came through. Those dreams. The ones you set down carefully in a quiet place inside yourself, because holding them in plain sight was becoming too costly. I know which ones they are. I know their shapes and the specific weight of each one. I know which ones you are still holding at some level, and which ones you have genuinely laid down with a kind of peace about the laying down, and which ones you laid down but not entirely at peace. The ones where the grief of surrendering them is still fresh at moments, where you sometimes find yourself thinking about them and having to actively redirect your thoughts away because thinking about them still hurts. I have not forgotten a single one, not the ones you are still holding, not the ones you laid down with peace, not the ones you laid down with grief still attached. They are in my hands, every one of them. And what I want to tell you is this: some of them are being redesigned, not diminished, not replaced with something smaller and safer, but expanded. Made into more than they were when you first imagined them, because the original version was born in a smaller space, in a younger heart, with less context, before you knew what you know now, before you were the person you have become. The version I have been building while you were in the waiting is shaped around the full version of who you are now. It can hold more. It serves a larger purpose. It is built for the depth you have developed. And some of them are arriving exactly as you imagined, unchanged by the waiting, except that they are richer now because of the road they traveled to reach you. More meaningful in the receiving, more deeply yours. Health is in my hands. Your body, every system, every cell, every molecular process is known to me in its complete detail. I made you, and I know every dimension of how you are made. I know what has been under strain. I know what has been damaged. I know what has been trying to function correctly under conditions that made correct functioning difficult. And I know what is being renewed, what is being repaired below the surface of what any measurement can currently detect, what is being strengthened and rebuilt and given back its capacity. I am not a God who cares for the soul and disregards the body. I made the body. I consider it the dwelling of my presence in the world. I honor it with my attention and my care. And I am bringing renewal to your physical life with the same comprehensive intention that I bring to every other dimension of who you are. You may experience this as medicine working better than expected. You may experience it as natural improvement that doctors explain through natural processes. You may experience it as something that defies easy explanation. I work through all of these channels. What matters is not the channel but the source, and the source is my desire for your wholeness, your complete, full spectrum, body and soul wholeness. And the years. I want to come back to the years one more time, because this is where I know the deepest grief often lives for you. Not just the losses, but the timing of them. The seasons of life when things were supposed to be different. The version of yourself at a particular age that you expected to be, and the gap between that expectation and the reality. The ordinary milestones that were supposed to be marked in a certain way and were not. The experiences that belonged to certain seasons of life that you did not get to have in those seasons, or did not get to have in the fullness you deserved. I hold time in my hands, not the way you experience time. One moment arriving after another in a linear sequence, each moment replacing the previous one and being replaced in turn. I hold all of it simultaneously. I see the beginning and the end, and everything between as a complete picture. And from that vantage point, what I see about your story is that it is not finished. The seasons are not done. The fullness that was absent from certain years is not permanently subtracted from your total. It is deferred, waiting in the seasons ahead. What I am bringing into the future of your life is calibrated to fill what was empty. Not as a calculation you perform consciously, not as a deliberate decision to replace grief with happiness, but as a quality of living in the abundant seasons ahead that carries within it, at its very core, the richness of provision that knows exactly what was missing and fills it with a specificity and abundance that could only come from the God who holds both the loss and the return in the same hands. The years have not been wasted. Every difficult one is part of the story. And the story, read in full, is going to be one of the most compelling stories you have ever encountered, because it is going to be a story of what my hands can do with a life that trusted me through the hardest parts. Before I take you into the future, let me pause here and speak to the river, because that image matters for this moment in our conversation. You know what it is like to live near a dry riverbed. You have seen them. The channels carved into the earth by water that once flowed through. The stones smoothed by ancient current. The banks shaped by the force of something that used to be there. A dry riverbed is one of the quieter sadnesses in a landscape. It holds all the evidence of what it once was. You can trace the path, see the depth of the channel, understand from the shape of the bed exactly how full and how powerful the flow once was. But the water is gone. And the land on both sides, the land that once was green and supported by the presence of the river, is dry. Many people carry this inside them, the evidence of what used to flow. The channel is still there, the capacity for joy, the shape of their relationships, the direction of their dreams. All of it is still there, still carved into the landscape of who they are. But the water has been absent long enough that the land on both sides has dried out. The vitality that came with the flow is gone. What remains is the form of a life that used to be fed by something alive, now maintaining itself in the absence of that supply. I want to speak to your dry riverbed. I am not asking you to manufacture water where there is none. I am not asking you to pretend the flow is present when it is not. I am telling you that the source is not dried up. The water that once filled that channel and fed the life on both sides is still available. More than available. It is on its way. The underground supply that has been moving below the surface, below the visible landscape, below the level of what you have been able to access in this dry season. It is rising. It is finding its way back to the channel. It is approaching the emergence point. And when it comes back, when the river runs again, the response of the land will be immediate and unmistakable. What has been dry will not take long to respond to the return of water. The capacity for life was not destroyed in the dry season. It was waiting. Everything that belongs in a well-watered life is still in the soil of who you are, dormant but intact, waiting for exactly this, the return of the river. Let me flow back into you. Let the water come. The channel is ready. The banks are shaped. The land on both sides, though dry, has everything it needs to respond when the supply returns. And the supply is returning. Now, I want to take you somewhere. I want to walk you into the future that already exists. Not as a fantasy constructed to make you feel better temporarily, but as a genuine reality that I can see from where I stand, and that is coming toward you as surely as the seasons come. Picture yourself in a season of fullness that you have not yet arrived at, but that is on its way. Not a particular imagined circumstance, not a specific arrangement of details that you might have designed if the design had been yours to do. Something better than what you would have designed, because designed by the one who knows you most completely and loves you most thoroughly, and understands what you actually need better than you understand it yourself. Imagine the moment when the thing you had given up on arrives, not when you expected it, not in the exact form you had originally pictured, but recognizably, unmistakably the answer to the question you had been living with, here in your hands, real and solid and yours. Stand in that moment for a moment. Let yourself feel what you will feel first. Maybe disbelief, the need to check, to verify, to make sure this is real and not another hope that will dissolve under examination. And then, as the reality settles in, something that starts in your chest and moves outward. A warmth, a fullness, a sense of rightness so complete that it reaches back through all the hard years and recontextualizes them. Suddenly you can see it from the other side. Suddenly the road makes sense, not because the hard parts were not hard, they were, but because they led here. They were the path to this exact place, and this place is worth the path. You will look back from there and understand something that you cannot fully understand from here. You will understand that I was present in every moment of the hard season, that nothing that happened was outside my awareness or beyond my concern, that the path that seemed to be taking you away from what you needed was actually, in ways you could not see while you were on it, leading you directly toward it. That moment of understanding is real. It already exists in your future, waiting for you to arrive at it. And the fact that you cannot see it from here does not make it any less certain. Let me describe that future a little more specifically, because you deserve to be able to picture it. You deserve to let yourself imagine what the arrival of fullness looks like in an actual daily life. Not in abstract spiritual language, but in the texture of ordinary hours. Picture a day that does not begin with dread. A day whose first quality is simply openness. Not the forced cheerfulness of someone who has decided to perform positivity, but the natural ease of someone who woke up in a life that is largely, genuinely okay. The small things are in order. There is coffee or tea or whatever you love, and it is good. There are people somewhere who are glad you are alive. There is something today that is worth doing. Something that uses what you are actually made of. Something where the effort feels more like engagement than like depletion. The light through the window is just light through a window, but it is beautiful in the way that light is always beautiful when you are not too exhausted or too afraid to notice. Picture the quality of your relationships in that future season. The ease between you and the people you love. Not the careful, monitored, watching for landmines navigation of relationships that have been through difficulty and have not yet healed, but the relaxed, genuine, sometimes laughing at ordinary things quality of relationships that are in good shape. People who know you, People you do not have to explain yourself to, who understand your humor and your particular way of seeing things, and who are glad to. People you can call with the small news as well as the large news. People whose presence in your life is a daily, ordinary, taken for granted in the best way kind of comfort. Feel the quality of your finances in that season. Not the constant calculation, not the anxiety of wondering if what you have is going to be enough for what the day requires. Not the specific constriction of someone who is managing scarcity carefully. The freedom of sufficiency. The open-handed quality of someone who gives without calculation because giving is no longer a threat to their stability. The ability to say yes to things that matter, to the trip, to the gift, to the cause, to the need in front of you, without first running the lengthy internal math of whether you can afford the yes. The lightness of someone for whom provision is a settled thing, a background reality rather than a foreground worry. Imagine yourself in your work, or in whatever it is that gives your days their direction and meaning, doing it well, doing it in a way that feels aligned with who you are, using what you are actually made of, the specific capacities and gifts and ways of seeing that are yours, in service of something that genuinely matters. Feeling, at the end of days like that, the particular satisfaction of someone who has spent the day doing something that deserved to be done and did it with everything they had. See yourself in your body, at ease in it, not in the constant monitoring state of someone who is worried about what their body might do next. Not in the cautious, careful management of someone living around a physical limitation. Simply inhabiting your body, the way healthy people do, largely without thinking about it. Moving through your days with the unself-conscious ease of someone for whom physical life is a gift rather than a burden. Stand in the moment when you are truly at rest. Real rest. Not the collapse of someone who has pushed past their limits until they cannot go any further. Not the anxious inactivity of someone who is resting, but cannot fully stop their mind from continuing to work. Actual, full-body, genuinely nourishing rest. The kind that restores, that replenishes, that allows you to wake up the next day feeling genuinely refreshed, rather than merely less tired than you were before you lay down. Notice how gratitude arrives without effort. Not performing gratitude as a spiritual discipline, not manufacturing thankfulness because you know you should feel it. Actually, genuinely, from the inside grateful for specific things, for the quality of your days, for the people in your life, for the life itself. Gratitude that is simply the natural response to a life that is genuinely good. This is the future that is coming. This is what the fullness I am bringing looks like in the specifics of an actual ordinary human day. It is not grand or abstract. It is the beautiful, ordinary, profoundly sufficient quality of a life that has been given back what it was missing and is now operating in the fullness it was designed for. It is coming. Let yourself believe that it is coming. And as you believe it, let me speak about the posture of believing. Because belief is not just an internal state, a private orientation of the mind and heart that exists in isolation. Belief shows up in choices, in the small daily decisions about how to hold your life, what to reach for, what to invest in, how to treat the ordinary hours of ordinary days. And those choices, shaped by what you believe, have consequences that accumulate over time and shape the direction your life moves. When you believe that good things are coming, you live differently than when you believe that the hard things are all that is available. You allow yourself to invest in relationships, in work, in the small daily practices that build towards something. You allow yourself to enjoy what is present rather than being too afraid of its loss to fully inhabit it. You allow yourself to hope out loud, to share your expectation with others, to say, I believe something is changing. I believe something good is ahead. And that spoken hope has its own kind of power. Not magic, but the real and practical effect of words that align with what I have said, spoken into the atmosphere of your own life. Believing, lived as a daily practice, changes the texture of your days even before the circumstances change. It softens the harshness of the waiting. It creates openings in your heart for the small signs of what is coming to land and register. It keeps the ember burning even when the fuel of visible evidence is thin. It is not just a spiritual thing, though it is that. It is also a practical, functional, affect your actual experience thing. So choose it. Choose each day the belief that what I have said is real and coming. Not as an act of denial of what is currently hard, not as a performance for anyone watching, but as a genuine, internally motivated, I have decided what I am going to believe decision. Make it again when it needs to be made again. Let it be something you consciously choose rather than something that simply happens when conditions are favorable. This is one of the most important things you can do in the space between the promise and the arrival. Choose to believe. Choose it when it costs you something. Choose it when the evidence is thin and the wait has been long, and the temptation is to protect yourself by expecting less. Choose it then, specifically, because that is when the choice has real power, not when it is easy, but when it is hard. And know that I'm not asking you to manufacture this believing alone, out of willpower alone, without help. I am the source of the faith as much as I am the object of it. When your believing feels thin, ask me for more. Ask me for the faith that can sustain the waiting. Ask me for the grace to keep choosing the belief when the circumstantial evidence is arguing against it. I give this freely. It is not in limited supply. The asking is met with genuine provision. There will come a day when you sit across a table from someone who was once distant, a family member, an old friend, someone whose absence from your life has been one of the quiet griefs you have learned to carry, and the conversation will have a quality that you had stopped believing was possible between you, not stiff and careful and monitored, warm, real. The ease of people who have chosen each other deliberately, who know the cost of what they are sharing and are glad to pay it. You will feel, in that moment, the specific sweetness of reunion that is only available to people who have experienced separation. The ordinary miracle of being truly known and chosen by someone you love. That day is coming. There will come a season when your finances are not a source of anxiety, but a tool for generosity. When the first thought that arrives with having enough is not relief, but the question of what you get to do with the overflow. When giving is no longer the sacrifice of someone who cannot really afford to give, but is determined to anyway. When it becomes the joyful, easy expression of someone who is living in provision and wants to spread it. When the background hum of financial worry is simply gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who has experienced, through actual lived evidence, that I am the God who provides. Not wealth for its own sake, provision for a purpose, enough to live freely, to give generously, to dream without the constraint of scarcity, to do the things you are called to do with the resources those things require. There will come a season where the first thing you notice at the start of each new day is not a problem or a worry or the cataloging of what still needs to be addressed. The first thing you notice is something that can only be described as goodness. A fundamental, underlying quality of your life that presents itself before you have reviewed the details. A readiness, an aliveness, a forward orientation that says, this day holds something worth being fully present for. That quality of waking up is coming. It is not yet your daily experience, but it is the direction your life is moving, and the distance between here and there is shorter than it looks from inside the waiting. You will receive the dream, in whatever form it takes for your particular story. The calling fulfilled, the work completed, the relationship arrived at, the place reached, the capacity finally unlocked. You will receive it. And when you do, you will hold it with a quality of presence and appreciation that only the waiting produces. You will not hold it carelessly. You will not hold it with the diminished attention of someone for whom having it feels ordinary. You will hold it with the full weight of knowing what it cost and who provided it. And in the receiving, in the holding, in the living of the life that has arrived, you will know, all the way down, that you are loved. Not because conditions improved, not because circumstances finally cooperated, but because the one who walked with you through every season before this one, who never left and never stopped working, proved in the fullness of what arrived that the walking through was always toward something. That knowing is going to be the foundation of everything that comes after. Unshakable, tested, real. Your health is one of the things I want to speak to specifically, because for some of you who are listening, the area of physical well-being has been one of the most discouraging losses, and also one of the areas where it can be hardest to hold on to hope, because the body gives feedback that is immediate and physical and difficult to argue with. Pain is hard to theorize around. Limitations are hard to hope past when they are present in the most immediate, non-abstract way possible. I want to speak to your body directly, not to the idea of your body, not to some abstract version of you that is purely spiritual and disconnected from the physical. To you, in your actual flesh, in the specific body that you live in, and that has been the site of some of your most personal difficulties. Your body is not your enemy. Your body is not a betrayal. Your body has been through something hard, and bodies go through hard things in a world where hard things happen. But your body also has capacities for renewal that exceed what any system of measurement has yet fully quantified. I built those capacities into it when I made it. I know them with a completeness that surpasses all medical knowledge. I know what your body is capable of when given the right conditions, the right support, the right ongoing care. And I know what it is capable of in response to my specific, intentional attention. You are going to know what it feels like to inhabit your body with greater ease. Whether this comes through medicine that works better than expected, through natural processes of healing that the body undertakes when the conditions are right, or through something that defies easy categorization. However it comes, it is coming. My renewal is moving through your physical life. Your body is not outside the scope of what I am addressing. It is included in the fullness. And those dreams. Let me speak one more time about the dreams, because I know there are specific ones that live closest to the surface, and that you think about most often. The ones you have not quite let yourself fully hope for, because letting yourself fully hope for them while they are absent costs too much. The ones you almost mentioned in prayer, and then pulled back from because it seemed like too much to ask. I want you to know that there is no such thing as too much to bring to me. There is no item on your list that is too large, too specific, too personal, too long held. I am the God of extravagant provision, of overflowing generosity, of more than you can ask or imagine. The limits I work within are not the limits of my power or my willingness. They are only ever the limits of my wisdom. And even within those limits, what I give is consistently more than what would feel like enough. Bring me the specific dreams, the ones you have been protecting by keeping them vague, the ones you have translated into more modest hopes because the real dreams seem too fragile to fully articulate. Let yourself want what you actually want and bring that to me, not as a demand, as a genuine conversation between someone who has need and the one who has provision. Say, this is what I have been hoping for. This is what I would love to see happen in my life. This is the specific good thing that I have not fully dared to fully hope for. And then let me answer. Let me respond in the way that I respond, which is not always exactly what was asked for, but is always more than expected, always proportioned to the full depth of the need, always calibrated to the full picture of who you are and what you need, and what will serve your flourishing most completely. I am a God who loves to give good things. This is not a reluctant God who must be persuaded. This is not a God who gives with one hand while taking with the other. I love to give. I love to provide. I love the moment when what I have been preparing finally arrives into a life that was ready to receive it. That moment is one of the things that gives me joy. Your flourishing gives me joy. And your flourishing is what I am moving toward right now, in every dimension of your life. Now there is something I want to do with you before we come to the end. Something that matters more than any of the specific things I have described. I want you to receive me, not the idea of me. Not a concept or a doctrine or a set of beliefs that you carry in your head without them living in your chest. Me, the actual presence. The God who is not contained by any single description and who is, right now, as close to you as the breath in your lungs, as present in this moment as you are, as attentive to you as you are to this word. I am not distant. I am not waiting for you to do something to earn closer access. I am not behind a set of requirements or conditions. I am here. I have always been here. My presence in your life is not dependent on your performance or your consistency or your ability to maintain the right posture toward me. It is dependent entirely on my choice to stay, and my choice to stay is unalterable. You are mine, not in the possessive sense that robs you of your freedom, but in the committed sense that means I have chosen you and I am staying. You are mine the way a father's child is his, through belonging, through identity, through a bond that hardship cannot break, and distance cannot erode, and time cannot dissolve. You carry something of me in you. I recognize that in you from the very beginning, and I have been walking beside you ever since, not as a stranger, not as a supervisor checking your progress, but as the one who is most invested in your flourishing. Let me be what I am to you. Let me actually be near. Let the walls come down. Not because walls are a sign of weakness, and not because you should not have built them, but because you no longer need them. What you are protecting yourself from, I am protecting you from. What you are managing alone, I am asking you to let me carry. Not because you are incapable. You have proven again and again that you are more than capable. But because carrying it together is different from carrying it alone, and the difference is so significant that it changes the quality of every step. Come back to me if you have been distant, or draw closer if you have been present but not fully open. Let the intimacy between us be what it was designed to be, not the careful, managed, arm's-length relationship of someone who is not sure they can afford to need someone, but the full, trusting, genuinely dependent relationship of a child who knows their parent and knows they are known. I am for you. That is not a temporary position. It is not contingent on how this season goes. It is not a vote of confidence based on your recent track record. It is simply who I am toward you. I am the God who is for you, entirely, consistently, comprehensively for you. Let me stay with that for a moment, because forness is something that is easy to say and harder to actually believe when circumstances have been difficult for a long time. When things keep going wrong, when what you hoped for keeps not arriving, when the gap between what you were promised and what your life currently looks like keeps refusing to close, it becomes genuinely challenging to hold on to the conviction that the God who is sovereign over all of it is fundamentally for you. The evidence, read through the filter of pain, can seem to point in another direction. So let me speak to that specifically. My being for you is not demonstrated by the absence of difficulty. It is demonstrated by my presence in the difficulty, not by my preventing every hard thing, but by my accompanying you through every hard thing and working within and through it towards something that serves your genuine flourishing. The stories in my word are filled with people who went through genuinely hard things, not because I had turned against them, not because they had disqualified themselves from my favor, but because hard things happen in a broken world, and I am the God who meets people in the hard things and brings them through to the other side of them, carrying more than they carried going in, having become more than they were before. Bornness does not mean easy. Bornness means that even in the hard, I am working. Even in the loss, I am building. Even in the silence, I am speaking. Even in the waiting, I am preparing. Bornness means that there is no season of your life, no matter what it looks like from the outside, that is outside the scope of my care and my intention for your good. Hold on to that when the holding is hard. Return to it when the circumstances make it feel untrustworthy. Let it be the one thing you decide to believe, even when everything else is uncertain, because it is the one thing that is actually, permanently, without exception, true. And from that forness, from that deep and committed and unconditional orientation toward your good, everything else flows. The making whole flows from it. The abundance flows from it. The joy and the peace and the hope and the return of what was lost. All of it flows from the simple foundational reality that I love you and I am for you and I have not changed. Let that be enough in this moment. Let the rest come as it comes, and let it come into a heart that is resting in this. You are loved. You are held. You are not alone. The work is not finished. The story is not over. The spring is coming, and I am the God who brings it. I want to speak for a moment about what it looks like to live in the space between what has been promised and what has arrived. Because this in-between space is where you are right now, and it deserves specific attention and specific encouragement. Living between promise and fulfillment is its own particular challenge. It is different from living before any promise has been given, when you were simply trying to survive the difficulty without a clear word that it would end differently. And it is different from living after the promise has arrived, when the evidence of fulfillment is present and you can see and touch and experience what I said would come. Between those two states is the third state, which is the one you are in. You have heard the word. You have received the promise into yourself. You believe it at some level, but you are still waiting for the visible arrival. The word is real, but the circumstances have not yet caught up to it. This is where faith actually lives. This is the space where hope is either strengthened or diminished, depending on what you do with it. This is the territory that every person who has ever trusted me has had to navigate. The gap between word and arrival, between promise and fulfillment, between the declaration and the delivery. Here is what helps in that gap. First, remembering. Go back regularly to the word. Return to what I have said. Let it be rehearsed not as a mantra but as a reality check, a correction to the narrative that circumstances try to tell, a reminder that what you see is not the last word on what will be. The word I have spoken over you does not change between revisitings. Every time you return to it, it is the same word, equally true, equally authoritative, equally certain of completion. Let the returning reinforce the believing. Second, marking the small signs. Every small indication that things are beginning to shift, and there will be such signs. There are probably already some if you are looking. Treat those signs as what they are. Previews. The first shoots in a spring field. The first small increase in the underground river before it breaks through the surface. Do not dismiss them as too minor to count. Minor is how major things begin. Honor the small signs by receiving them as genuine evidence of what is coming. Third, speaking about it to at least one person who will hold the hope with you. Faith shared is faith sustained. There is a reason I called people to gather together, to encourage one another, to speak the truth to each other regularly. Isolation shrinks hope. Connection to people who are also trusting me, who are willing to hold the promise alongside you, expands it. If you do not have that person yet, ask me for one. It is exactly the kind of specific provision I love to make. Fourth, giving thanks in advance. Not performed gratitude that you do not feel, not the forced happiness of someone pretending things are better than they are. Real gratitude for what is coming, expressed before it arrives, from the confident expectation of someone who knows the character of the one who made the promise. This kind of anticipatory gratitude is one of the most powerful things a person can practice in the in-between space. It shifts the orientation of the heart from waiting in lack to receiving in expectation, and that shift is significant. You are in the in-between space, but you are not stuck there. You are passing through it, and the passage is moving toward the fulfillment. Every day that passes in the in-between is a day closer to the arrival. The arrival is coming. Now let me bring you to the place where all of this lands. The place where everything I have said converges into something simple enough to carry with you. Something is already happening in your life, underneath the surface of everything you can currently see. In the invisible landscape below your circumstances, where seeds grow without announcing themselves, where rivers move through rock toward their emergence, where the foundations of future seasons are being laid without fanfare or visible evidence. The hard years were not a mistake in the story. They were part of the story. The losses were not final verdicts. They were chapters in a narrative that is still being written. The silence was not absence. It was the particular quality of a season in which the most important work was happening below the surface, where human impatience cannot reach it, where the results cannot be measured until they are ready to emerge. And now, they are emerging. I am the God who stood in the middle of the desolate places and said, "This is not permanent." When I looked at the bare fields, I said, "These will produce again." I am the God who took the handful of years that the locusts consumed and said, I will make up for those. It is in my character to walk through the fire with those who are thrown in. I brought those 3 men out without even the smell of smoke on their clothes. I am the God who met the wanderer in the wilderness and gave them water from the rock. My word to you has always been the same. I will never leave you. Not, I will leave sometimes when circumstances require it and return when conditions improve. Never. I have never left you. Not for a moment. Not in any of the seasons you lived through. Let me dwell on these testimonies for a moment, because they are not just ancient history. They are the pattern by which I work in every life, in every time. When I walked through the fire with those 3 men, the miracle was not just that the fire did not kill them. The miracle was the quality of the presence in the fire. There were 4 of them visible in the flames, not 3. The 4th was me. I did not stand outside the fire and direct them with instructions about how to survive it. I entered it with them. I stood in the heat alongside them. My presence in the fire was what transformed it. Not from fire into something comfortable, not into something that was no longer fire, but into something that, because I was in it too, was not able to do what fire normally does to human beings. You have been in a fire. The fire was real. The heat was real. The danger was real. And I was in it with you, not directing from a distance, present in the heat, alongside you in every moment of it. And the miracle in your story is similar to theirs. Not that the fire was not real, but that the fire was not able to do to you what fires do to people who face them alone. You came through. You are coming through. And when you emerge, what the observers will see is not the smell of smoke on you, but the evidence of who you are after the fire, which is someone who has been through something that should have destroyed them, and has instead become someone more fully themselves than they were before it. When I provided water in the wilderness for the wanderers who had been in the desert for years, I did not first require that they reach the edge of the desert on their own. I met them in the middle of the wilderness. I did not wait for them to be almost there, almost through, close enough to the end that a little provision would carry them the rest of the way. I met them in the middle, when the middle was exactly where they were, when the middle was exactly what they could not get themselves out of without help. You do not have to reach the edge of your wilderness to receive my provision. You do not have to almost make it before I show up. I meet people in the middle of the hard place. I meet people in the exact location of the need. And the provision I bring is not just enough to carry them to the edge. It is enough to transform the wilderness experience itself from one of pure deprivation into one that has moments of genuine sustenance, genuine refreshment, genuine evidence that they are not alone, and that the wilderness is not where the story ends. I am meeting you in the middle, right here, right now, in the exact location of your need, not waiting for you to get closer to the resolution, coming to you in the middle of it. And when the wanderers finally came through the wilderness, when they crossed into the land they had been promised, what they carried with them was not just survival and relief. They carried the story. They carried the testimony of what I had done in the wilderness, the water from the rock, the provision from the air, the leading by fire and cloud, the strange and unexpected sustaining grace that had been present through every impossible mile. That testimony became part of who they were as a people. It became the thing they returned to when future difficulties arrived. They could say, "We have seen this before. We have been in a place that looked like the end and were brought through. We know who our God is because we saw what He did when we were in the place where we needed Him most." You are building a testimony right now, in the middle of the hard place. The things I have done for you in this difficult season, the ways I have sustained and accompanied and provided and protected, those are accumulating into a story that is yours, that belongs to you, that you will carry with you into the abundant seasons that are coming. And when future difficulties arrive, because life in this world always includes seasons of difficulty, you will not face them as someone who has never been through anything and is encountering hardship for the first time. You will face them as someone who has a testimony, someone who can say, "I know what my God does in hard places. I have evidence. I have a personal story of His faithfulness. And that story is in my bones, not just in my memory." What I am building in you through this hard season includes, significantly, this testimony. This story you are accumulating. This personal, lived, unmistakable evidence of who I am and how I operate in a life that is mine. It is one of the most important things you will carry into what comes next. Let me say something about that testimony and what it will eventually do. Not just for you, but through you. There are people in your future who are going to need your story. Not a polished, sanitized version of it. Not the highlights edited together into something that makes faith look easy and reward look obvious. They are going to need the actual story. The hard parts, the long wait, the moments when hope was genuinely thin, the specific quality of what it felt like to keep believing when believing was costing something real. They are going to need to hear that from someone who has actually been there. Not from someone who is speaking theoretically about suffering, but from someone who sat in it, who stayed in it longer than felt bearable, and who is now on the other side still choosing me and still glad they did. Your story is going to be one of the most valuable things you carry into your future, not as a wound you display, as a testimony you share, as evidence from your own actual lived experience that I am real, that I am faithful, that the hard seasons end, that what was lost is recoverable, that the desolate places do bloom. Specific evidence, not theological argument, not someone else's story, yours. Some of the people who need that testimony have not yet arrived in your life. Some of them are already there, but the conversation has not happened yet. And some of them are watching you right now, in the hard season, watching how you carry what you are carrying, noting the quality of your faith and your perseverance, and something in what they observe is doing something in them that they cannot quite articulate. Your faithfulness in the hard season is not only for you, it is a witness. It is light in a dark place that reaches further than you know. And the fuller your story becomes, the more it includes the turn, the arrival, the blooming of the places that were barren, the more powerful and usable that witness becomes. The contrast between what the difficult season was and what the abundant season is, that contrast is the substance of the testimony. That contrast is what makes the story too real to dismiss. The person who goes from genuine, specific, costly loss to genuine, specific, abundant recovery carries a story that has weight. That has the kind of credibility that only comes from having actually lived it. Your story is going to have that weight, and I am writing it with you, carefully, with the full intention of making it the kind of story that does in the lives of others exactly what it has done in yours. That gives hope to the hoping, that sustains the faith of the struggling, that makes the God who did all of that in your life impossible to dismiss. This matters. What you are going through right now matters not just for the person on the other side of it, but for everyone that person will reach. The fullness of what I bring into your life in the seasons ahead is not only for you, it is meant to flow through you. That is how my abundance works. It does not pool and stagnate. It flows. It moves into the life it is given to, and then moves out of that life into the lives that life touches. You are going to be someone who pours out because you have been genuinely filled, and the pouring out is going to matter in ways you cannot yet see. And what I said over your life in the beginning, I am still saying. The words have not expired. The promises have not been withdrawn. The intention I had for you when I formed you has not diminished in the face of what you have been through. If anything, the intention has grown more specific, more personally calibrated, more precisely shaped to fit the exact version of you that all of this experience has produced. Walk forward with open hands, with a heart that is choosing, day after day, to believe what I have said over choosing what circumstances seem to say. Not because believing is easy, it is not always. Not because the evidence always supports it, it does not always. But because I'm faithful in a way that transcends evidence. Because my track record, in the lives of every person who has trusted me through hard seasons, is the consistent production of something good on the other side. Because I am the God who specializes in the other side. The desolate places of your life will bloom. This is not wishful thinking. This is not spiritual language designed to make you feel better in the absence of actual change. This is a word, a real word. spoken with the full authority of the one who made the fields and knows what they are capable of, spoken with the full knowledge of everything that stands between you and the blooming, spoken with the full intention of a God who says what he means and does what he says. Walk toward the bloom, not frantically, not with the desperate energy of someone who is afraid it will not come if they are not relentless enough in their pursuit of it, but with the steady, trusting, forward-moving orientation of someone who knows the direction of the road and trusts the one who built it. Step by step, day by day, with your hands open and your heart available and your eyes looking for the small early signs of what is coming. And there will be small early signs, early shoots breaking through, early evidence in ordinary moments that the season is shifting. Honor the small signs. Do not dismiss them because they are not yet the full thing. Every large thing was once small. Every full bloom was once a single shoot pressing through frozen ground. Every river that now flows wide and open was once an underground current that had not yet found its emergence point. What is small today is the beginning of what will be large. Receive it as such, and come back to me. Again and again and again, in the days when it is easy, and in the days when it is not. In the days when the hope feels strong, and in the days when it is nothing more than that small, quiet ember. In the days when the small signs are visible, and in the days when you cannot see any sign at all. Come back to my presence. Come back to my word. Come back to what I have said, which does not change with your circumstances, or your moods, or your ability to feel it on any given day. I am constant. My love for you is constant. My commitment to completing what I started in you is constant. My presence with you in every moment is constant. These things do not require any action on your part to remain true. They are simply true. You are going to be all right, more than all right. You are going to be whole and full and flourishing. You are going to live in the abundance that was always what I had in mind. You are going to inhabit the life that was waiting for you at the end of the hard road, the life that could only be yours because you are who you became by walking the road to get here. The garden that looked finished and bare is going to bloom, not barely, extravagantly, with the particular extravagance of a God who does not give back in the minimum amounts but in the overflowing ones. With the color and fragrance and abundance of a place that was tended by hands that do not cut corners and do not give up and do not forget a single corner of the field that was entrusted to them. Your corner of the field is in my hands, every part of it, and I am tending it with everything I have, which means it is going to be extraordinary. Let me tell you about the garden one more time, because I want to end there. In the image of the blooming, in the picture of what desolate places look like when they have been given what they need to become what they were always capable of becoming. A garden that has been neglected, or that has been through a hard season, a drought, a winter that lasted longer than expected, does not look like much. Walking through it, you see brown and bare and cracked. You see the evidence of what was, but not the evidence of what could be. You might look at that garden and struggle to believe that it was ever beautiful, or that it will be beautiful again. The gap between what you see and what the garden is capable of seems too wide to cross. But the gardener who knows that land, who has worked it, who understands what is underneath the surface of the dry and bare exterior, that gardener does not see what the visitor sees. The gardener sees potential. The gardener sees a soil that has been broken up and mineralized by the very seasons that made it look dead. The gardener sees root systems that are still intact, still alive below the surface, still capable of sending energy upward when conditions improve. The gardener sees a garden that is ready, a garden that is waiting for the care that will unlock what it has been holding in reserve. I am that gardener, and I see your garden the way a gardener sees it, not as a visitor who is discouraged by the current appearance, but as the one who knows what is underneath, what is possible, what is waiting to emerge when the right attention and the right conditions arrive. And I am bringing both, the attention, my full, comprehensive, not missing a corner attention, and the conditions, the water the dry ground needs, the warmth that breaks the dormancy, the specific care for the specific needs of each area of your garden, because not every corner needs the same thing. Some areas need more water, some need more light. Some need the clearing away of what has been blocking their growth. Some simply need time and the consistent presence of someone who is not giving up on them. I am not giving up on any corner of your garden. I am in every corner. I know what each part needs, and I am providing it. Picture then, not just the garden in the distance as something you are walking toward, but the garden as a place you are walking into. Picture stepping through the gate of the life I am preparing for you and looking around and seeing, everywhere you look, evidence of what I have done with the desolate places. The areas that were bare are now full. The areas that were brown are now green. The areas where nothing seemed to grow are now producing not just growth, but abundance. Color and fragrance and the particular beauty of things that were not just grown, but tended with love. See yourself standing in the middle of all of that and knowing, in your body, not just in your mind, that you are home. That this is the life that was always supposed to be yours. That the long road through the hard places led here, to exactly this. That none of it was wasted, not a single mile of the difficult journey, because every mile brought you one step closer to standing where you are standing now. Notice that the place you came from, the wilderness, the dry riverbed, the bare winter field, is visible in the distance. Not erased, not forgotten, but behind you now. Part of the story that brought you to this place. No longer the entire story. No longer the defining thing. Just the road that led here. And picture me, standing in the garden with you. Not as someone looking on from outside, as the one who planted it, who tended it, who never walked away from it even when it looked like there was nothing there to stay for. Present in your flourishing, the way I was present in your difficulty. Fully, continuously, with all of my attention on you. That is where this is going. That is the garden that is ahead. That is the blooming of the desolate places that I promised you. Walk toward it. Every step in the direction of the garden, every choice to continue in the believing, every morning that you get up and choose to live as though the promise is real, every one of those steps is a step toward the gate. The gate is not as far as it has looked from inside the hard season. You are closer than you know. And here, before I release you to walk toward it, I want to speak one final word. A word that is not a conclusion, but an anchor. Something to carry with you out of this time and into your ordinary days. Something simple enough to hold on to when the larger truths become hard to access. Something that functions as a foundation when everything else feels uncertain. You are held. Not metaphorically. Not in the vague sense of a spiritual concept that floats somewhere above the practical reality of your daily life. Actually held. In real time. Right now. In the specific circumstances of your actual existence. By hands that are stronger than what you face. By a love that is older than your story and bigger than your losses. By a presence that has not left and will not leave and does not know how to be anything other than what it has always been toward you, which is completely, relentlessly, unconditionally for you. When the days ahead are hard, and some of them will be, because you are not done with the journey yet, you are closer to the end than the beginning, but not at the end. Hold on to this. When the wait feels long again and the evidence is thin again, and the question of whether any of this is real starts to press on you, return to this. Not to a theological argument. To this. You are held. It is real. It is happening right now. And what is held in my hands is not lost, cannot be lost, will not be lost. Walk forward from this moment, from right here, from right now, as someone who knows they are held. Let that knowing shape how you carry yourself, how you approach the days, how you receive what comes, and how you meet what does not yet come. Walk as someone who is held, which means, without the desperate urgency of someone who has to produce their own security, without the crippling fear of someone who believes they are ultimately on their own, without the exhausting vigilance of someone who has never experienced being genuinely safe. You are safe in me. Walk like it. Live like it. Let your life, from this day forward, Be the expression of a person who is held by the God who promised to make all things whole, and who is fully, completely, already and always in the process of doing exactly that. And when the days come, as they will, when this feels hard to remember, when the weight of what has not yet arrived presses in and the certainty of what I have said feels distant, return here. Return to these words. Let them do again what they did the first time. Let them reach again into the part of you that needs to hear them. Return to this. What was taken is coming back. The desolate places are being tended by the one who made them and has never stopped caring for them. The seeds are pressing upward through the soil. The river is rising underground toward its emergence. The harvest is approaching, and you are held, completely and without condition, by the one who spoke all of this and means every word of it. Walk toward it. Amen. If this message has spoken to your heart today, share it with someone who needs to hear that what was taken from them is not gone forever. Type the word restored in the comments right now, as a declaration of faith that you believe in what God is doing in your life, even when you cannot yet see all of it. Subscribe so you never miss another message like this one, and come back often, because there are more words waiting for you here. More truth, more encouragement, more of what your heart has been searching for. God has not forgotten you. He has not walked away from the work He started. He is not finished yet. And neither, not even close, are you.